والآن نستمع إلى ورقة عمل من السيد كورنيليوس ماتس المدير التنفيذي لشركة دي ديزرت انرجي بعنوان A broader picture on the energy transition in MENA and why this recent hype on hydrogen.
Good morning, everybody. Excellencies, Minister Dr. Scharke, ambassadors, dear AFA colleagues. It's a true pleasure that you invited me here and that you put this important topic, energy transition and hydrogen, on such a high level. That's really a very important moment this morning to be able to give to you the speech. And the last few years have been really challenging. Pandemic, energy crisis in Europe, gas price crisis, and consequently also ammonia prices getting crazy, and now with the terrible war in Ukraine. So I hope to be able to give you an overview on the broad picture on what has been happening over the last decade in energy transition, and then also answer this question on why this hype around hydrogen. And let me reiterate a message already today. We believe the time is now, the moment is now to create millions of jobs with an accelerated energy transition, to create partnerships between Europe and Egypt, and there's a long history for strong partnerships also with my country, Germany, and then eventually, help together to create really an energy transition for peace. DRI as Desertec has been well known. We started in 2009 in the region to work, and this original idea that you could theoretically power the world with just 5% of the deserts, this is more actual than ever. Obviously, DRI has gone through different phases from Desertec 1.0 to Desertec 3.0, and we've learned a lot over time. We are still learning every day, but the most important things we learned, obviously, is that we need to establish trust, long-term partnerships with the countries and point on the huge opportunities to transition entire economies, create jobs first. And we are now at Desertec 3.0. My team is based between Dubai internationally, but Desertec 3.0 is pointing on the huge opportunities to make the region actually not only a regional, but a global powerhouse for green molecules. And this is exactly the third development phase you see here. We believe, and particularly being in Egypt, Egypt has amazing achievements. If you look at the emergency power program Dr. Scharke outlined before, people thought this is impossible. I remember 2015-16, but it was delivered. Binban, a pioneer in solar, one of the largest solar parks, successfully delivered at lower and lower prices. Egypt has been a wind pioneer in more than 20 years ago, and first producer of green ammonia globally, as we well know. So particularly Egypt, we see not only as a strategic location in the region, but really has the potential to play the central role in the entire MENA region to become a trading hub for green electrons and green molecules. And NEOM is thinking about the first ammonia fuel station for ships, to power ships. That's just opposite Sharm el-Sheikh, and Egypt can also partner with organizations like NEOM. Now, for us, it is always important when we talk about energy transition to point on the entire chain and to look at the system. That's what we've been doing with DRI, studying, step by step, transforming entire energy systems. And we look at renewable generation, which can be different sources from photovoltaic to wind, hydropower like in Egypt, and then we look into how to integrate into the grid. We look at electrical interconnections. That's also a big trend which is coming more and more with the Egypt-Saudi interconnection. And then we look at storage, battery storage. We did a big first report 2 years ago on battery in MENA as business opportunities. But now hydrogen comes in, mid to long-term storage, very, very important. And always underestimated, but even more important, is the demand side. The demand side, first of all, was energy efficiency, flexible demand. We look at district cooling, ice and cold storage, what sort of role this can play in the GCC, for example. But this is always very important to point out on the entire chain. DI, Desert Energy, or known as Desert Tech, has established itself now for 13 years as the leading think tank, really neutral, covering all aspects of the energy transition value chain, green electrons and green molecules. And we're doing studies as a think tank. We are a discussion platform. We are amplifying the message for our partners. We are creating business opportunities. And the most important thing is the trust and the partnerships we build. Let me also make a small announcement here. After 2011, when we had our second annual conference in the Semiramis, just a few hundred meters on this side, we are coming back now, just before COP27 was the 12th annual summit. And for me, it's also a special moment to speak here in front of you, because I see a number of familiar faces, friends, partners over long term. And you know, this long-term trust for us, these partnerships, they are so essential to make the energy transition happen and accelerate it now. This is a little bit more than 60 industrial partners. ThyssenKrupp recently joined as a strategic partner. Aqua Power is a long-term partner. We have a very good mix of many of the local players, but more than 25 countries. So originally started out of Germany, DI is absolutely not a German initiative anymore. It's more international than it can be. Now, I mentioned about work we've been doing in the past. This is a graph from Desert Power 2050. Some of you might remember we presented this first big study in 2012, where we modeled an energy system, North Africa, Middle East, Europe, entirely on renewable energies. And we prove scientifically, with complex modeling, with Fraunhofer, backed by the industry, 10 years ago, that this is technically possible. It can create millions of jobs. It increases energy security for all partners. And most importantly, it would have been economically convenient 10 years ago. 10 years ago already, it would have been economically convenient. So what does the energy transition stop, actually? So 10 years later, we already far outconceived optimistic cost estimates in 2050. So in 2020, we are much, much lower than even optimistic assumptions would have forecasted for 2050. And this should really make us reflect what can happen in this decade. And I come to a few points later on. So just to underline by a credible independent player, which is IRENA, based in Abu Dhabi. So solar came down by 85%, and this is globally, neutrally, minus 85% levelized cost of electricity, and wind power in the same time minus 56%. This is really amazing, and more will happen, because we are only now at a point where exponential growth on deployment is happening. Bear in mind that in the last few years, in terms of newly installed capacity globally, renewables has already been more than 90%, but this is now exploding. We'll soon talk about terawatts and not gigawatts of PV, for example. So this is also to show that the region has been leading this development, and I'm very, very happy to report that a number of world low records have been scored here in the region. I'm based in Dubai, and the turning point was November 2014, when Aqua Power did the famous 6 cent for Diba phase 2. And since then, we have come down to 1 cent in Saudi Arabia. We are between 1 to 2.5 cents solar, 1.5 to 3.5 cents wind in the region. And it doesn't really matter if a recent challenge over the last few years of temporarily increasing prices. The broad picture is completely unchanged. And this is really a revolution. And leading obviously to over 20 gigawatt of capacity. I shortened my presentation a little bit. I would have actually had some insights about countries on energy transitions. Let me just give a few headlines so that you are aware of what's happening. Morocco is at 42% renewables today, several gigawatt of wind, more than 2 gigawatt solar CSP and PV in gigawatt, and Morocco is now, with the new Minister Laila Ben Ali, Minister of Energy Transition, accelerating and looking obviously at the huge possibility of green molecules, which can alone dwarf the entire energy system today. Algeria has been an early mover in 2015, but unfortunately lost momentum. There's around 500 megawatt of PV operating and a small wind park. Tunisia, unfortunately, not much has happened. When we started 12, 13 years ago, Tunisia already had PV and wind, and we hope that the country catches up. Egypt is a leader in the energy transition, a pioneer in wind power, Africa's largest wind farm, more than 2 gigawatt of wind. I go the day after tomorrow to the inauguration of another nice wind farm, Bakr West, 250 megawatt, wonderful achievement, and even through the pandemic. So I only can congratulate Egypt for these great achievements, and as I mentioned, we believe that Egypt has really the potential in becoming the central hub for trade of green electricity, green molecules between the region, but also between the region and Europe. And personally, I don't have any doubt that we will even have a hydrogen pipeline from Egypt to Europe in maybe less than 10 years. We can see what happens. Oman has been a bit of a laggard, but recently picked up, also delivered 500 megawatt PV through the pandemic, the IBRI 2 project. There's another 100 megawatt. There's a first large wind farm, and Oman has gigawatts alone now in the national program by OPWP. And only in green molecules, Oman is a big leader. It has 6 gigawatt of concrete projects in midterm planning. This is quite amazing. In the UAE, where I'm based, I'm going cycling at one of the largest solar parks. This will be 3 gigawatts by end of this year of operational capacity, out of which 700 megawatt CSP with 12 hours full load storage. CSP has also a small renaissance now. It's absolutely not dead. So this is reality in Dubai, and the UAE will have 6 gigawatt of solar on grid by the end of this year, which is also, I think, an impressive achievement. And I just met Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, CEO of ADNOC, with the chair of the German Hydrogen Commission on Friday, and very, very important messages on accelerating the energy transitions were actually given. Saudi Arabia has also been a laggard for many years, but for the last 4 to 5 years has been on an impressive catch-up. Again, with NEOM, Helios project, I will come to this, but also with different tenders, with the 1 cent solar 1.04, as you know, and with an impressive program. 400 megawatt wind has been connected recently, so also Saudi Arabia is fast catching up. I don't want to forget Jordan. Jordan has been also an early pioneer, and Jordan, probably in terms of breadth and market segments, has been really also a leader in energy transition, and Jordan has approximately 400 megawatt wind, 1.2 gigawatt of solar, and more importantly, different market segments which are essential to make the energy transition happen. So in addition to utility scale projects, industrial commercial projects, Jordan has a wheeling scheme where you can produce at A and consume at B, and also residential, which is very important, and also on the hydrogen, Jordan has important plans. So this is just a brief view, but this is the DII project database. We track, we map every single project, and a lot has been happening, but the 20 gigawatts are actually a recent result of maybe the last 3, 4, 5 years, and this is now massively accelerating. So MENA has obviously huge opportunities for green hydrogen, and I mentioned it is about job creation, stability. We made a recent report, I will show you in a minute, on calculating hydrogen jobs in 3 GCC countries, and the region here can completely transform, and I don't have any doubt that this will happen. I was in October in Morocco, Morocco has a big agenda now, actually not only to produce or export green electrons, green molecules, but attract entire new industries with low-cost renewable energy, because this has a value on the market, and there is very important geopolitical implications. We made reports on this. There is really a revolution happening here in the region. This is out of the report, and we just analyzed trade flows, and just to point that Egypt obviously is already exporting LNG. Egypt is interconnected to Jordan, for example, and this was for the GCC, but the same is obviously applicable to Egypt, and Egypt can become an important player. And you see Europe here, and when we met Dr. Sultan on Friday, this was an eye-opener for me. And this was conveyed to the German government. The German government, and you've heard about the last few days' developments, Germany already said 80% renewables by 2030, 8 years from now. Yesterday, 100% renewables in Germany by 2035. In 13 years from now, Germany 100% renewables. But Germany is importing 80% of primary energy, most of them molecules. So Egypt can be one of the key partners for Germany in the future to green these molecules as fast as possible. Not only greening them, there is a big urgency now for Europe to diversify the supplies, as we all know, for this tragedy which is currently happening. Now, on hydrogen, in 2 years, the world has completely changed. Like, we started to work here in 2009, when people laughed at us, renewable energy, too expensive, we don't need, we have oil and gas, this will never happen. Now look where we are today. We started to work in hydrogen 6 years ago. We published our first big report, the North Africa-Europe Hydrogen Manifesto in 2019, following this, launching the MENA Hydrogen Alliance. But look what has been happening in less than 2 years. And these are some public sector, but also some private sector initiatives. And the consensus is to bring down the cost of green hydrogen below $2, if not to $1 in this decade. And private sector initiatives like Catapult, this is one thing, but look at public sector, look at what India is doing, look at what Department of Energy is doing in the US. This is really impressive, and this is all very recent. And I don't even want to talk about colors. We say we don't need colors anymore. We say low emission, no emission hydrogen. But the most important message is we believe, we don't have any doubt that low, no emission hydrogen can compete with fossil-based hydrogen, with gray hydrogen, black hydrogen, whatever, in this decade. And this is really a revolution. Now, this is to show, and we do a lot of modeling with our CTO. So the message I want to give here is that more than just solar, we all know that MENA has amazing solar resources. We look at wind resources, and Egypt is blessed by world-class wind resources. You can do green hydrogen wind-only projects. Egypt has tens of gigawatts of potential, and you need a certain full load hours for a viable business case. The big game changer for hydrogen, to start with this message, why hydrogen has become such a buzz, such a hype now, where you need also almost to calm down discussions, is the cost of electricity. The cost of electricity in a kilogram of hydrogen is approximately 2/3. And this is why hydrogen is viable today. Hydrogen has seen waves over the last few decades, but this low-cost electricity, the record low solar and wind, and MENA is world leading in this, has the potential to make it happen now. And then, of course, many other factors come together. Geopolitical factors, climate change, the tectonic shift in financial markets over the last 2 years, net zero in the region alone is a massive thing. So with all these ingredients, hydrogen will happen fast. Now, another point is we have electrical interconnections. We have also Morocco connected to Spain. There is many more pipelines today existing in the Mediterranean, and green molecules give the possibility to store unprecedented amounts. If you look at the capacity of a subsea cable, of a high voltage direct current cable, that's maybe 2 to 3 gigawatt. But with molecules, one pipeline is 60, 70 gigawatt. So you can store long term, you can integrate more renewables. Some of the existing infrastructure is there, and world-class infrastructure is also in Egypt and in the region, which can be captured from oil and gas. NEOM, the Helios project, a purely commercial project. In advanced planning stage, the sites are prepared, and purely commercial. I can assure you, we connect demand and supply, that there will be a massive undersupply of green molecules in the second half of this decade. I can give you several examples on this. So commercial projects are happening, $6.5 billion this project. Now I see, unfortunately, I don't have time, but I can share the slides with you. So I have brought you an overview on all the projects and initiatives which are happening on hydrogen, and this is all 2 years. Actually, most of them are from 1 year. It shows you the amazing momentum. And this is UAE. I just mentioned before, you know, Mazda was a JV with ADNOC. Mazda today is one of the largest renewable energy companies, 100 gigawatt by 2030, 200 gigawatt midterm. This is Saudi Arabia, Oman. Unfortunately, I need to close. I just see on the message, Egypt, Morocco. This is all on green molecules. This is all happening. And our CTO modeled the cost of green hydrogen. We have all these models. It's cheaper today than gray hydrogen. Today, cheaper. And this is on the MENA Hydrogen Alliance. I'm just flipping through here to close my speech. On what we are doing exactly here, on Project Tracker, on connecting, and we work internationally to create the preconditions, certification, international agreements here. These are the reports. That's the report. And 1 million jobs only in GCC. It can create 200 billion US revenues from hydrogen sales, and the stability, the prosperity we need. Huge, huge opportunity. And this is basically to close my closing messages. So net zero in MENA, this has been in September started by the UAE, Saudi followed, Aramco 2050, net zero, Bahrain followed. COP27 is here. We will hold our next annual event, as I mentioned, just before COP27. Huge opportunity, and and net zero is changing the picture. Liabilities of emissions at all, and the volatility in ammonia prices, the volatility is increasing risk premium. So this is a big thing now, a massive implication, more than the price itself, the volatility, and this will never go away. And then we have obviously the cost of production coming down, and unfortunately, I'm afraid I need to close. That's the book you can all read about Desert Tech. And thank you so much again. We can make it happen together. Again, thank you to AFA for inviting me here. We are in such an interesting time, and let's join forces to make these partnerships with Europe. Technology is there, prices are there. Really a massive thing can happen and create prosperity, stability, and peace, most importantly, in the region. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Cornelius Matthes, for such a valuable word. Always a pleasure to have you here in Egypt.